I recall the moment I became a ghost in my once promising life. The echo of that realization, the cold sound of loneliness, still resonates in our empty, lavish home. At that point of despair, I imagined the opulent walls were silently blaming me for my solitude. I am Lily, and I now admit, with trembling honesty, how I moved to the brink of my life. It was a normal night, yet the night revealed deep fissures within me. My husband, Oliver, was so occupied with work that his presence in our life was a memory. Our beautiful home, which used to be filled with love and laughter, now only suggests neglect. I moved through these chambers in a trance, with emptiness weighing on me like a dense fog. At those moments, every emotion was heightened. The soft rustle of the breeze through our vaulted windows brought Oliver's absence nearer to my senses. I could hear the distant laughter of a beloved life now lost to solitude. My heart beat with grief and a desire for approval, as if the universe had orchestrated my aloneness to impart to me the cruel lessons of abandonment. I remember sitting, alone in our dimly lit dining room, the table formally set for two. The sparkling silver and crystal glasses now reminded me of my solitude. Each clink of the forks echoed, reminding me that Oliver was not there to share the meal with me. I was invisible, spun into the background, a silent observer of a life no longer our own. I perceived myself as not a partner, but a lonely soul in need of a human touch. The emotions were raw. Desperation, rage, and longing ripped at my mind. The bitter flavor of an untouched dinner was a reminder of abandonment. Each bite was a reminder that I was feeding a body that was no longer connected to the love it had known. I remembered when Oliver's smile illuminated the room, and his eyes mirrored common dreams. Now, those recollections seemed like disappearing echoes in silence. Sitting there, I wondered when the switch was made. Was it gradual, like the sunset? Or sudden, like a winter storm that left frost in its trail? I could not remember when exactly we parted, only the pain of loneliness in my heart. It was a pain that was deep, like a part of me had been removed, and all that was left was an empty shell that existed without actually feeling. I grazed the cold marble table, its smoothness reassuring me that the world still did. My fingertips made contact with the carvings, and for a moment I felt a spark of life beneath the numbness. Then I recalled that it was no more than an inanimate object, nothing at all comparable to the lush intimacy that I once knew. The harder I chased that fleeting heat, the quicker it vanished, and I was left with nothing but longing and regret. I was trapped by the walls that were meant to protect me, and the silence was stifling. Every night in our empty bedroom, I was able to hear my breath and the hum of the city, a reminder that life continued while I stood still in despair. The bed with its cozy sheets turned into a bittersweet stage for my solitude. I lay there in the dark, staring up at the ceiling, trying to figure out whether I was dreaming of a forgotten love or I had forgotten how to feel. This confession comes not from regretting the past, but from a need to purify my soul and bear my inner truth. In the silence of the night, when the world halted for my quiet, I would ask myself, who am I? But the accumulation of abandoned sighs and unrealized longings. In those isolated hours, I yearned for connection and to be reconnected with that woman I once was, a woman who dared to dream and feel. With a heavy heart that longed for rebirth, I resolved to quit my gilded cage. I had to flee my isolation, even at the cost of my tenuous existence. Little did I know, this quest would reshape my soul, propelling me into a world where pleasure and pain were one and desire and guilt danced along the precipice of redemption. That night, the suffocating silence of my home became unbearable. With my heart pounding in defiant rebellion against the numbness, I slipped away into the night, driven by an irresistible pull toward something unknown, something raw. I found myself standing before a modest coffee shop, a small, unassuming establishment that promised neither luxury nor pretense, but rather a refuge for those lost in their quiet despair. As I crossed its threshold, the soft, golden glow of interior lights and the inviting aroma of freshly brewed coffee washed over me like a long-forgotten memory of hope. I remember vividly the moment the door closed behind me, a gentle, final click that seemed to seal my escape from the oppressive loneliness of my home. Inside, the coffee shop was alive with a warm hum of conversation and the soft clatter of cups and saucers, a stark contrast to the sterile silence I had left behind. The air was rich with the scent of roasted beans, steamed milk, and a hint of freshly baked pastries, mingling with an undercurrent of quiet music that evoked memories of lost youth and possibilities. In that space, the ordinary became extraordinary. Every murmur and every glance exchanged between strangers carried the promise of untold stories and unspoken desires. I took a seat at the worn wooden counter, its surface smoothed over years of countless confidences and silent admissions. The barista, a kind-eyed soul with lines of wisdom etched around his eyes, greeted me with a nod and a knowing smile. "Rough night?" he asked softly as he prepared my coffee. I managed a small smile. "You could say that. I'm searching for something I lost a long time ago." He nodded in understanding, as if my words echoed the silent sorrows of many who sought refuge in this place. Moments later, as I sipped the rich, robust coffee, I noticed him, a young man sitting at a corner table, absorbed in a book, yet glancing up occasionally with a spark of curiosity. There was something in his gaze, a mix of mischief and sincerity that drew me in. Our eyes met, and in that charged moment, the distance between our worlds seemed to dissolve. He rose and approached my counter. "Hi," he said softly, his voice warm yet tentative. "I couldn't help but notice you seemed lost in thought. I'm Dave." I looked up, my heart unexpectedly quickening. "Lily," I replied, my voice barely above a whisper. "I'm not sure if I'm lost or just searching for a way back to who I used to be." Dave offered a gentle smile. "Sometimes a good conversation is all it takes to start finding your way again." His words, simple yet resonant, stirred something deep within me, a flicker of hope, a promise of renewal. We sat together at a small table tucked away by a window. Conversation flowed naturally between us. "I feel like I've been invisible for so long," I confessed, my voice trembling with vulnerability. Dave's eyes softened as he replied, "I see you, Lily. Every word you say, every pause, speaks of a strength you might not realize you have." For that brief time, amidst the aroma of coffee and the murmur of other patrons, I felt seen. His gentle inquiries and empathetic silence coaxed the hidden parts of me into the light, and I began to believe that perhaps I could reclaim what had been lost. As the night deepened, the coffee shop transformed into a sanctuary of shared vulnerability. Every soft laugh and every thoughtful remark between us wove a tapestry of intimacy that transcended the physical space. When it was time to leave, Dave hesitated at the door. "Can I see you again?" he asked quietly. "Yes," I whispered, a fragile smile playing on my lips. "I'd like that very much." With that, he stepped out into the night, leaving me with a head swirling with thoughts and a heart trembling with both excitement and trepidation. I walked back into the cool night air, feeling, for the first time in a long while, that I was not alone. I waked to memories that pulse like a heartbeat, each one echoing with the gentle intensity of a dream half-remembered. In the quiet aftermath of that fateful night, as dawn timidly crept over the horizon, I found myself suspended between a lingering euphoria and the dawning awareness of what I had dared to do. Every detail of our encounter, the softness of Dave's skin, the hesitant exploratory caresses, the deep searching glances, remains etched in my mind like the lines of a sacred manuscript, each word a testament to a moment when desire broke, free from the confines of a neglected heart. The intimacy we shared was unexpected and raw, a confluence of emotions that neither of us had anticipated. I remember how, in the dim light of his modest apartment, every touch carried the weight of years spent in quiet yearning. His hands, gentle yet insistent, traced the contours of my form as if trying to rediscover every curve and shadow I had long forgotten. It was as though he was unraveling the layers of my carefully guarded self, revealing hidden truths that even I had buried beneath the weight of routine and resignation. The sensations were overwhelming. Each caress ignited a spark of recognition, a reminder of a passion that had lain dormant, waiting for the right moment to burst forth. I felt a mingling of liberation and vulnerability, the simultaneous thrill of surrender and the terror of the unknown. In his embrace, I discovered a paradoxical freedom, a space where I could be both fragile and fierce, where every whispered word and every lingering touch was a promise of renewal and redemption. I surrendered to the moment, allowing the raw currents of desire to carry me away from the confines of my past and into a realm of unspoken possibilities. At this point in my confession, I feel compelled to reach out to you, if you've felt even a flicker of connection with the raw truths I share. Please consider subscribing to our channel. Every subscription is not just a click, it's a promise that you're here, that you believe in the power of honest, unguarded storytelling. Join me as we navigate these intricate emotions together, and let's build a community where every heartbeat is heard. Your support fuels this journey, making every shared moment a step toward healing and understanding. In that sacred space of vulnerability, I dared to believe that perhaps I could reclaim the part of me that had been lost in the shadows of neglect, that I could find solace in the warmth of another's embrace. And for those precious, fleeting hours, I allowed myself to dream that redemption might be possible, that my heart could mend its fractured pieces, if only I dared to dream. Yet, even as passion surged through my veins, a quiet, insistent voice of reason whispered in the recesses of my mind. I knew that every moment of this fragile connection carried with it the seeds of both beauty and inevitable pain. The delicate balance between longing and loss, between pleasure and regret, loomed in the background like a silent specter, a reminder that even the most tender unravelings of the heart are not without consequence. I clung to that truth as I surrendered to the sensations, knowing that the path ahead was fraught with uncertainty, yet irresistibly inviting in its promise of a life reborn from the ashes of forgotten dreams. In the tender afterglow of our union, as the first light of dawn began to break through the shadows, I lay there enveloped in a cocoon of both fulfillment and foreboding. My body still hummed with the remnants of every caress, every whispered sigh, and in that vulnerable state, I felt the raw edges of my soul laid bare. It was a moment of exquisite contradiction, a bittersweet taste of liberation mingled with the inevitable pang of loss, a reminder that every act of connection carries within it the potential to both heal and scar. The moment the sun's first rays pierced through the drapes, reality descended upon me like a tidal wave. I awoke not to the soft echoes of whispered promises, but to the harsh, unyielding glare of morning, a stark reminder of the choices made in the tender embrace of night. In that fragile, transitional hour, the euphoria of our union gave way to a crushing awareness of guilt, an emotion so raw and consuming that it left me gasping for air. As I lay there, tangled in the remnants of passion, every sensation that had once awakened my desire now seared into me as a piercing regret. I sat on the edge of the bed, the coolness of the sheets grounding me in a reality that was both familiar and unbearably alien. The weight of my actions bore down on me, and the silence of the room was filled with a cacophony of memories and self-recriminations. I could still feel the softness of Dave's skin and the warmth of his touch, sensations that now served as painful reminders of the chasm that had suddenly opened within me. In that early morning light, my mind was a battlefield where the remnants of passion fought a losing war against the relentless tide of remorse. Each breath I took was heavy with the knowledge that I had strayed from the path of who I once believed I was. A devoted wife, a woman who lived a life defined by duty and decorum. Instead, in one fleeting night, I had surrendered to a desire that was both exhilarating and profoundly disquieting. The intoxicating blend of liberation and despair left me adrift, questioning the very foundations of my identity. As I stared blankly at the ceiling, the quiet hum of the world outside mocked my inner turmoil, a stark contrast to the tumult that roiled within. I retraced the moments of our encounter in my mind, each memory dissected under the unforgiving scrutiny of self-doubt. The tender touches, the shared smiles, the whispered confessions, they all played out like a bittersweet film in my head, each frame tinted with the duality of passion and regret. I wondered if, in the depths of that night, I had been chasing not just a fleeting thrill, but a desperate attempt to reclaim a part of me that had been long suppressed. Had I, in seeking the warmth of another's embrace, been trying to fill the void left by years of neglect? The question haunted me, echoing through the silence of that solitary room. The guilt was not immediate or explosive, but a slow, burning ache that seeped into every fiber of my being. I felt as though I had betrayed not only the trust of my husband, but also my sense of self. The realization that I had allowed a moment of vulnerability to unravel the carefully constructed narrative of my life was a bitter pill to swallow. I replayed every word, every caress, wondering if the promise of connection had been worth the price of my conscience. The delicate balance between longing and betrayal, between the warmth of intimacy and the cold reality of duty, had collapsed in an instant, leaving me to navigate the ruins of my decisions. In that long, silent morning, I felt a profound sense of isolation, a loneliness not born of physical absence, but of the internal chasm that now yawned within me. I longed for the comfort of Oliver's familiar presence, the reassurance of a life that once seemed whole, yet now felt irreparably fractured. I was trapped in a labyrinth of my own making, where every thought was a reminder of the choices that had led me astray. The sunlight, once a symbol of hope and renewal, now cast harsh shadows on the memories of passion, revealing the stark truth of my actions. As I gathered the scattered fragments of my resolve, I began to understand that this morning was not just the end of a night filled with forbidden passion. It was the beginning of an arduous journey of introspection and self-forgiveness. I knew that the path ahead would be fraught with difficult conversations and moments of piercing self-awareness. Yet I also recognized that this was a necessary reckoning. In the quiet solitude of that early hour, I resolved to confront the emotions that had long been hidden beneath the veneer of duty and complacency. I had to learn to reconcile the person I had been with the woman I was becoming, to find a way to heal the wounds that now marred my soul. Every sound, the distant hum of traffic, the gentle rustling of leaves outside, seemed to carry with it a message of inevitability, a reminder that life marches on regardless of our internal battles. And so, with a heavy heart and trembling hands, I began the slow process of piecing together a truth that was both painful and liberating. I knew that the guilt I felt was not a burden to be borne in silence, but a catalyst for change, a call to rediscover the strength and vulnerability that had once defined me. Walking back through the ornate corridors of my home, each step echoed with a mixture of trepidation and resolve. I re-entered the life I had long known, where the opulence of my surroundings masked the emotional barrenness that had become all too familiar. Oliver greeted me with his customary nonchalance, his eyes seemingly devoid of any inkling of the turmoil that had transpired during my escape. At that moment, the dissonance between the external world and the internal tempest within me became painfully clear. I could almost feel the weight of his absence lingering in the spaces between our conversations, in the idle silences that stretched longer than they once had. As I set down my purse and slipped into the routine of our evening, every familiar detail was transformed by the revelations of the previous night. the rich tapestry of our life together now felt threadbare, each once vibrant, color muted by the guilt and longing that clung to me like a second skin. I moved through the rooms with a measured pace, as if every step was a cautious negotiation with the fragile remnants of my self-worth. Later, seated at our dining table, meticulously set for a couple whose hearts had grown estranged, Oliver finally broke the silence. "How was your evening, Lily?" he asked, his tone neutral yet laced with an unexpected curiosity. I hesitated, searching his face for any sign of understanding. "It was reflective," I replied softly. "I found moments of beauty in unexpected places." He raised an eyebrow. "Unexpected places?" "Yes," I murmured, my voice wavering with the weight of my confession. "I met someone, a young man. We talked, and for a moment I felt seen." Oliver's gaze dropped to his plate, the clatter of cutlery filling the pause that followed. "Is that so?" he said, almost a whisper. "And did this conversation change anything for you?" I met his eyes, the vulnerability in them mirroring the storm within me. I realized that I have been living in silence for too long. I needed to know that I still can feel, to connect. The air between us thickened with unspoken truths. Oliver's voice, though low, held a trace of hurt. "I wish you had told me, before you sought it elsewhere." "I know," I whispered, the words heavy with regret and longing. "But it wasn't about replacing you. It was about finding myself again." For a long, silent moment we sat there, two souls adrift in the vast gulf of our shared past and uncertain future. In the quiet solitude of my room later that night, I allowed myself to reflect on the journey that had brought me to this crossroads. The passion of the coffee shop, the tender unraveling of my defenses, and the bitter dawn of guilt, all converged into a mosaic of experiences that challenged every notion of who I thought I was. I had stepped beyond the boundaries of a life, marked by duty and restraint, only to confront the raw, unyielding consequences of that liberation. The choices I had made were irreversible, each one carving deep furrows into the landscape of my soul. I sat by the window, watching the city lights flicker in the distance, as if mirroring the fleeting sparks of hope that still lingered within me. In that moment of quiet introspection, I recognized that my journey was far from over. The path ahead was uncertain, filled with the daunting task of reconciling the woman I had been with the one I was becoming. I had to confront the dissonance between desire and responsibility, between the allure of forbidden intimacy and the bonds of a shared past. The road to self-forgiveness, I realized, was paved with both pain and possibility. My confession was not an excuse but a plea for understanding, a recognition that the human heart is a complex tapestry of longing, regret, and the ever-present need for connection. I knew that healing would require more than just a return to the familiar. It would demand an honest reckoning with the choices I had made and the consequences they carried. In the stillness of that night, I made a promise to myself to seek out the fragments of who I once was, and, in doing so, perhaps forge a path toward a future where I could embrace both the beauty and the burden of my desires. As I lay in bed, the soft murmur of the night a stark counterpoint to the cacophony of my thoughts, I allowed myself to dream of a life reimagined, a life where love was not measured solely by duty or obligation, but by the capacity to feel deeply and without reservation. The road ahead was shrouded in uncertainty, yet I found solace in the quiet conviction that every step, no matter how painful, was a step toward rediscovery. Thank you for listening. Drop a comment below if you like these infidelity stories. Subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss any cheating wife stories.